Welcome to the How to Play for Kids on Brooms. We're going to go over the stats and the basic how to play so that you have a quick primer before we get started with today's session. So there are a total of 6 stats. Those include brains. This is how smart your character is, book smart, and will determine how they will understand problems or what are they doing wrong in school. You have brawn. This stat determines how much brute strength that the character has. It doesn't determine how well they can fight, just how well they can lift things and how much physical damage they can take. You have fight. This determines how good of a combatant a character is with whatever weapons they're using in fighting. You have flight. This determines how fast a character is, well, as skilled as they are evading problems, both literally and figuratively. Creators have a high flight stat will be fast enough to tough out a trap both physically and verbally. Charm. This stat provides how socially adept a character is and how good they are at reading emotions in other people's or groups of people's. Grit is the last stat, and grit determines how hard it is to break a character emotionally or physical. Characters with a high grit are able to keep their head level at the worst situations. These 6 stats go into different die rolls. You roll with a d4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 20. You assign each one of these dice to one of these stats, creating your character and how they are perceived and how well they are each individual stat. These are each selected, and you can see these on our rotating panel, who has the die for which stat. These dies are important because that's how we're going to do stat checks. Just like in Dungeons and Dragons, you have agility checks or athletics checks, and you have to meet a DC. In Kids on Brooms, you also have to meet a DC with the dice. For the sake of this example, let's pretend that we have a d6. We roll this d6 to determine our flight ability. If we roll it and we get a 6, we get what's called a lucky break, which means we can keep rolling and adding. If we got another 6, we would add another lucky break, and then say we got a 2. We would have a 6, 6, and a 2 for a total of 14. If the target number that we were trying to hit was lower than a 14, then we would meet that target ability. The system does include a well thought out difficulty system. 20 is typically the highest number that you'll see because getting a 20 on a die is pretty hard to do, let alone when you have dice with d4. It would take multiple lucky breaks. We have skill checks from 1 to 20, and you can go above 20, but these are things that are very rare because you would have to crit on a d20 to get above a 20, so that would be very hard to do. Lastly, failing isn't the worst thing to happen. In Kids on Brooms, there's a unique system called an adversity token. If you fail your roll, you can take an adversity token. You still fail, but you can use this token in later ones to help you. Say that you're going across a challenge with a d6 with a rating of 4. You roll a 3. You can spend an adversity token to add +1 to your roll. Other players can also spend their adversity tokens to help you by giving you +1, but they have to explain to the GM how they're helping you out. These stat rolls are created whenever you make a planned or snapped decision. These planned actions are ones that are lower pressure or common, like figuring out how to work with your friends or going through a difficult problem in study hall. A snap decision is something that happens when you have a quick choice or under bad circumstances. Once you roll your die and say, for our example, the target number is 4, if you roll your die and you meet the 4, then your character succeeds, but just barely. There are modifiers going 10 or higher or -15 or lower. You actually get an outcome based on how close or far you are from the target number that you're going for. So if you have a target number of 4 and you have a d20 and you roll a 20, now you're 16 above, and so your character would be able to succeed with this smoothly and easily, kind of showing off. And the narrator can help, the game master can help write that into the story. There are times when our characters have fears, and those fears can cause us to make choices that are harder. Whenever you are faced with one of your fears, you have to make snap decisions. You cannot spend adversity tokens, and depending on the severity of the fear that you are presently seeing, you may have up to all checks at a -3 penalty. Now, a -1 penalty is probably good when the fear is present, like you're afraid of snakes and you're in the terrarium and the snake is nearby, or a 2 is when there's a good amount of fear and it's persistent and possibly relevant, like the snake is loose in a library where it's not supposed to be. And a -3 penalty would be when the fear is persistent and overwhelming. Perhaps you're coiled around a snake or you fall into a pit of snakes. These can all affect your skill checks. In Kids on Broom, one of the unique systems is spell checks. Many role-playing games have a list of spells, but in Kids on Brooms, you can actually create the spells and cast it in the way that you want to. You describe to your game master how you want the spell to go, and then they look at the tables and listed in the Kids on Broom handbook, and they show, depending on the magnitude of effect, the area of effect, the duration of the effect, and the experience with the spell, you have a target number that gets set for you. This target number can change and will impact how well you're able to do it. Just like other skill rolls, spells also have a how well did you do, depending on how close or far you are from that target number. Again, going 10 or higher on the max end, or 15 or lower on the lowest end. You can have the spell fail or go through ecstatically and perhaps cause unexpected thing to happen when you cast a spell. Combat. Combat in this game functions as other skill checks, just like everything else. Physical dice are more direct combat, either fist fight or things have gotten really bad with spells. To roll in combat, the attacker is going to roll a fight against the defender's grit if they're standing their ground or fighting back, or flight if they're trying to evade. From those two contested rolls, you look at the table in the rule book and determine how far away you are, the attacker or the defender. If the defender's roll is greater than or equal to the attacker, then the defender narrates the outcome and the defender is uninjured. As the attacker gets higher and further away from the defender's die, let's say 1 to 3 or 4 to 6, even 10 or more, this can cause the defender to quite literally fall unconscious, badly hurt, or even die. Dying can happen in Kids on Brooms, even with magic. Potions are another concept. Potions, you describe what you'd like the potion to be, how long you would like to last for, and the GM sets a difficulty for creating that potion. Once the GM sets difficulty, you roll, you see if you create it, and then you have that in your inventory. This was a quick primer before we start today's session. We hope that you really enjoyed and it helped you get oriented before we start. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in chat and we will try to get to you when we can. Remember to be kind, to love one another, and enjoy the session.